What if the difference between where you are right now and where you want to be isn't talent, but it's actually your habits? You don't need more motivation. Like, you don't need any more swing tips. What you need are going to be habits that actually stick and they last for a lifetime. What we're talking about today isn't just going to be just for your game, but it's going to be true in your life. What we're going to do is we're actually going to take the real life story that we talk about in our book, In His Own Secrets, which, by the way, make sure you get a copy. We'll put that link in the description below. But what we're going to share today is, honest to goodness, the key to why this kid in high school went from literally failing every class that he took to being the worst kid to then literally within a few short years to becoming the one of the leading entrepreneurs of one of the most successful magazine companies in the world. Today what we're going to do is we're going to break down the key habits, and that's what we're going to expand on today. So make sure you stick to the end because we have something we're going to give you that's going to be really cool. So make sure you stick to the end and keep your eye out for that because I promise you it's going to change your game.
Absolutely. Champions, they're extremely motivated. We all can agree to that. However, it's that they rely themselves on systems. Today, we're breaking down 10 habits that separate the stuck golfer, which it might be you, from being stuck to being unstoppable. So, write this down. This is an acronym for system. It means save yourself stress, time, effort, and money. That is a system. And we've actually created a system with psychoneuromuscular training that breaks through the wall of indecision. It breaks through the wall of not being confident or not being committed and actually gets you into the zone at the flip of a switch. So, number one, system or your willpower, what I was talking about with motivation, willpower fades, systems sustain. Willpower is like a match, it burns out. But systems, they run on autopilot. Why? Because a system is something that is like a routine, and a routine is not a routine if you have to think about it. So when you put your system on autopilot, you become unstoppable.
100%. And one of the cool stories, guys, that came from one of our clients that actually followed our system, Second Misco Training. This is what's so interesting. Sometimes people are doing all the right things, but yet they're on a plateau. And this one particular gentleman was just that. His name's Dennis Guffey. This is a guy that had a stroke in 2017, then went out on a journey and worked with 40 of the top 50 Golf Digest coaches. So just think about that for a second. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of money being spent. Unfortunately, none of it worked. The sad part is he was still shooting scores in the 90s and 100s. And then when he came to us, we were literally his last option. So before we go further, I want you to hear directly from him and what changed in his game.
Yeah, I get disgusted because I was at one time in my life a 1.9 handicap. Now, I was back when I was in my 30s and I'm 71 years old now. I have some physical problems. I've got bad knees. I've got restless leg syndrome. I had a stroke in 2017, and I've certainly never been as good since then as that. But I love the game and I don't want to stop playing. And on the other hand, I do not enjoy playing badly, and I had to do something or it just wasn't going to work out for me.
What were like your scores that you were shooting prior to working with us? I think you were up like in the upper 90s, some rounds in the
Upper
hundreds.
90s, sometimes 100, 105, and that's just not good for me. And even at my age, I'm physically much more capable than that.
So, what were some of the results that you experienced after going through our program?
Well, it's really interesting. I started playing better immediately. My consistency was much better. The ability to do mental practice and to do that at any time was supremely important to me. And you guys were very encouraging. And I always tried to provide honest and open feedback when we talked. And Shannon has just been terrific about how to go about the mental processes. And I just have to say, you guys, nobody does these mental processes to the level that you do. And I think that made all the difference in the world to me. I, we've never talked about this, but I've actually seen 40 of the top 50 golf instructors in the country. Okay, I've spent a tremendous amount of money, time, and effort doing this, and I wouldn't take anything for the dollars that I spent on this. This is the best money I ever spent on golf because I was able to implement it quickly. I'm able to move forward and implement it in the future. Many of the top 40 guys I've been, I mean, they're all nice fellows and they're trying hard and many of them are good at their crafts, but none of that really stuck with me for a long time. And the thing I've got complete confidence about now is that I'm off. First of all, I could call you fellows and I know you'd take care of me. And second, I know that I know what to do. I know how to fix things and I know how to stay in the course. One of the most important things is to stay the course and to not give up before you master something.
Now, was that not amazing? Like, he went from literally shooting scores in the 90s and 100s to on the verge of quitting the game, and he told me he was looking to actually pick up bowling. And that was pretty sad considering that he retired to play his golden years less than a block away from the course that he's a member at. And the good news, he followed a system, and because he followed a system, he saw results. That's the beautiful thing about a system is that when you have something that you repeat and you do over and over again, just like the SAT story kid, when he and we talk about this in the book, but what happened was is he was incorrectly sent the wrong score of a 1480 when in fact he made a 740, and so what he did is he believed that he was a 1480 student, so he started behaving like a 1480 student and started doing all the behaviors that match up, basically following a system and everything else that we're going to cover in the next few key habits that he did. But that's ultimately what led him to becoming one of the world's most successful magazine entrepreneurs in the world. Because Dennis followed a system, he saw results.
Absolutely. The thing is, if you don't have a system, frustration becomes your default because you're not sure where to go and to move in to that. Let's move on to number two. Master the fundamentals of optimal living. Your swing isn't the only thing that's affecting your score. You can't swing like a champion if you live like a zombie. Let me say that again. You can't swing like a champion if you're living like a zombie. There's got to be four things of optimal living that can actually drive your golf game, and not just your golf game, your life game, so to speak. And the things that you need to focus on is what can you eat? That's the number one. And then how are you moving? And then what are you thinking? And then what is your sleep like? Those are the four keys of optimal living. If you eat bad, you're going to feel bad. A prime example is one of our tour players. She actually hired a nutritionist. And what happened was because she started noticing the pattern near the end of her golf rounds where, for example, I don't know if you know this, but dehydration can actually cause depth perception changes near the end of the round. And so what happens is, yeah, when you're at a good distance, you use your rangefinder. That's not your depth perception. But what I mean is, if you're chipping to the green where you're not actually using your rangefinder, it actually affects your depth perception when you're dehydrated. So that's one thing. But what happened with her was she changed this portion of it. She actually was finishing the round with a lot more energy. Okay, and she was working on her sleep, and because she was getting the correct amount of sleep going into it, she was coming out with a lot more energy and thinking more clearly. And so, number two, the move. You exercise daily. Laziness begots laziness. When you're lazy and you're not exercising, whether it be on a daily basis or throughout the week, you're not exercising, you actually become lazy. You become more lazier. And then sometimes that can move into a depression state as well. But what happens is when you're exercising daily, it creates dopamine in the brain and actually gives you more energy. You start thinking more clearly. Because you're moving more clearly with that. And then number three is how you think. What are you thinking throughout the day? Not just that, but your mindset. Where's your mindset? Do you have that elite mindset? Jesus said that he's given us the mind of Christ, so we have to follow that. And what does the mind of Christ look like? And that is doing what Jesus did. But do you have anything on that as well?
Yeah, I think the cool thing about the mind of Christ is that, well, if he is our example, then what did Jesus do? He spent time with the Father. And so there's an intimacy piece to this that is extremely important, but it's also meditating on God's word. Now, the word like meditate, when you look at that in Joshua 1, it's to speak, it's to utter, it's to like literally think on these things. So there's action that's taken place behind that. That's why in James it says, become a doer of the word. Like you can't just know God's word, you have to go out and act on it, and you have to be a doer of it. It basically, I have this quote in my office, I love it, it's by Curry Blake. He said, to the degree that your mind is renewed, your life is transformed. And it's so true. And so that's why it's important. What are we feeding ourselves daily? Are we living in God's word and we're building ourselves up from that and we're basically feeding our spirit man those things, or are we going to basically consume everything that's just junk on TV with Netflix or whatever that isn't doing any of those things? It's super important because what you are putting in, what's going to come out when you're squeezed, and that's going to be a video topic that we'll be covering later. But yeah, that's super important.
And then the last one is sleep. I want to talk about sleep. We've all heard, we know about the Tour de France, some of the most amazing endurance athletes ever in the world. They're riding over basically 100 miles every day. They for a week, then they have a day off, and even in their day off, they're actually on the bike as well because they found that actually with their muscles, it's hard to reactivate after having a full day off. Literally for 3 weeks, they're on the bike and they're riding at least 100 miles every single day. One of the things that they have learned is it's all with them, it's all about marginal gains. So think about that, marginal gains. If you have a marginal gain in your food, if you're in your exercise and in the way you think clearly, what Bo was talking about, and then even in your sleep, that's going to be huge because you got each little marginal gain that's taking place, each one, that's going to be a huge gain. But here's one of the things that they started doing. All of the Tour de France teams, they started getting custom made mattresses, and because every single day they're in a different hotel, their sleep optimization has increased 99% because what they're doing is they're going into every single hotel room, changing all the mattresses out, putting in the mattresses so that they can sleep well. So then what happens is all the pressure, all the nerves that are going on, all the beds are going to be feeling different. They might be tighter. They might be more, the comfortability of the mattresses are going to be different in every single one. So why not bring your own mattress? So then it takes that level of nervousness out where you don't have to worry about it, where you're going in and you're actually getting some great sleep every single night. Not just that, they total black out the room. They keep it dark because of any light that in it can affect their sleep. So they're really dialing in to their sleep going into that. Here's the other thing about sleep. If you sleep 7 hours a day or 6 hours a day, you are actually limiting the amount of memory, things that you learned that day, from going to short term to long term. That's why it's important about sleep. Because if you get an 8 hours of sleep, you're actually developing that to where everything is going into your long-term memory versus short-term. That's why it's important.
So the guys, that was mastering the fundamentals of optimal living. And then the third habit that we need to develop is we got to find your keystone habit. I like to think of this as what's the big domino that we can knock over that's going to knock over all the other little dominoes. So like it's literally the key that unlocks all the others. And for us, it's spending time with the Lord. Like we start each of our days like literally at his feet. It's the intimacy. It's a relationship. It's not just like going and just reading and just like checking off a box. It's much deeper than that. It's really a marriage, so to speak. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about marriage is like God's given us a clear picture on this side of eternity what that relationship is supposed to look like. It's intimacy, it's a relationship with the Father, it's that time that we spend. Because it's not just a one way street. It's not just us like coming to Him and just saying all these different things two ways. Sometimes it's just sitting at His feet and just listening. just like Mary talks about. I love that story that Jesus talked about with Mary and Martha. Martha's running around doing all the different things, cleaning up, doing all that stuff. And then Mary's sitting at his feet, and Martha gets upset. And she comes to him like, Lord, send Mary into the kitchen and help me. And he basically tells her, like, Martha, Mary chose the better thing. And I love that because that's ultimately one of the keys that unlocked Jesus' ministry is that he would draw away from his disciples. It talks about in the Gospels where he would literally go away in the middle of the night, so to speak, early in the morning, and he would go spend time with the Father. And so that's the keystone habit for us because it's that time that's so sacred that when we spend time with the Father, one of the biggest things that unlocks our ability throughout the day to do everything. And I think that's why prayer is important here. So that's an example for us, like personally speaking. But then, like for golf, don't hear me wrong here, even if you're not a believer, like there's a principle here that is still so important. Because when it comes to psychoneurological training, one of the big things that we need to make sure that we're doing all the time is visualization. What's so amazing about visualization, even if you go back and you look at just the building blocks of this piece, there's a book written by Bob Rotella. He talks about it in The Golfer's Mind. And in that book, in chapter 2, Bob details an amazing story. He talks about Sam Snead. He's about to go speak at a conference. This is a make or break moment in Bob Rotella's career because they told him and warned him ahead of time, Sam's going to speak his mind. And if he says anything that, hey, you're full of it, Bob, your career is over. So Bob knew that going into the speech. And so Bob goes in, gives his presentation. And then, interestingly enough, Sam does stand up. And then what comes out of Sam's mouth shocked Bob himself too. Sam stands up and says, we need to listen to this young man because what he's saying is true. He said, back when I was playing on the tour and I was winning all those events as a young man, I would go to bed the night before and I would visualize the perfect round the night before I'd go out and play it. And he said the morning I'd wake up, I'd feel great, I'd shower, and then I'd go play a round that literally almost unfolded exactly the way I would visualize it. And so that's a key piece. That's a keystone habit in our system, psychomuscular training, that we firmly believe is one of the keys to actually becoming great in this game.
I want to reiterate what Bo was talking about. One of the things that actually separated Sam Snead as well was he didn't just go back and visualize the perfect round. He actually fixed all the bad shots that he had the previous day or that day, that night as he was going to bed. And so what happened was because of the visualization, he was breaking a possible negative habit loop that was going on in his head. So then if he came up, let's say, with a hole 3 and let's say he shanked it the first day, then that night what he's doing, he's going back and revisiting that hole on hole 3 and mentally seeing the perfect shot off the tee and it's not shanked. So then what happens, what can happen is there could be a negative habit loop that goes through, and he's breaking those little negative habit loops going through and building that. So then what Bo was talking about, so then next morning when he wakes up, guess what? All those marginal gains that it took place that day, he's actually stepping up to the first tee a lot more confident. Why? Because he fixed all those shots the night before. So huge keystone habit when it comes to getting your mental imagery and getting your visualization in throughout the day, for sure.
So number 4 is identify your kryptonite. What is the one thing that you need to stop in your life, maybe in your golf game, that's going to finally allow you to start winning or just ultimately get your breakthrough, whether that's breaking 80 or maybe breaking 70 or finally getting to a scratch handicap. Like we've got to identify what is like the habit that is not serving you. And that could be your at night. We talked about sleep. Shannon did an amazing job breaking down all the different parts of sleep. But what if you got your phone in bed and you're sitting there at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and you're just sitting there scrolling on Facebook, Instagram for the next hour and a half? Then you got that blue light that's coming in that's not making you tired. And I can't tell you how true that is because there have been times I got 2 young kids and I will be putting my son to sleep. And what's so fascinating about that is that I'm getting tired myself, but then when I pull my phone out and I actually start looking at some stuff, getting caught up on emails, things like that, like boom, I'm like actually wide awake again. So that's a big thing that we have to keep in mind. What's our phone usage? Are we watching TV? Are we engaging in negative self-talk? These are all things that cannot service. It might be we're eating like a lot of sugar at night. It could be, again, surrounding ourselves with toxic relationships. There's a lot of different things that can act as kryptonites in your golf game and then in your life. And so it's important that we take time and we build that awareness to figure out what that is and then cutting that out, because that could be the one thing that ultimately becomes like the big domino that we need to knock over so that we can have all the other successes that come right behind it.
Actually, you can't build momentum when you have anchors that are dragging you down. And like with what Bo was talking about, when it comes to, like, for example, if you go through and you eat, let's say, ice cream before you go to bed, guess what? You're going to get a sugar rush and it's going to affect your sleep. And all the stuff that Bo was talking about is huge going through, and that also comes down to the four things of optimal living. What is your kryptonite? You need to definitely identify that, and so that it can get that shift change to where it's going to help you to perform when it matters the most.
Absolutely. And so, guys, number 5 is you need to know your why. Now, we can make the argument that this is probably the most important. It is definitely one of the key things that you need to understand, especially if you're going to set out to do anything in life or in this game of golf. And the key thing that you have to understand is you will not stay disciplined without a deeper reason. The best thing that I can give you as an example for this is one of our college teams is a D1 team that we work with that's actually won a national championship. The last couple of years, they've really been struggling as a program. When we got called in, flown in to work with them over 2 days, the fascinating thing that we found with them is they're doing all the right things. They're really doing all the right things. They're in the who's who of conference, playing against the best of the best. They have amazing facilities. They have an amazing swing coach for multiple players on the team that actually works with quite a few tour players. They have done some mental training in the past. They have Sam Putt Lab. They have TrackMan. They have an indoor simulator. They literally have everything that you can possibly imagine. They are also doing everything that you're supposed to do from a fitness and nutrition standpoint. But what's interesting is that they were stuck on a plateau. So how does that make sense? Why are they stuck when they're doing all the right things and doing what even the top 5, top 10 programs are doing? The biggest reason is they didn't know their why. When we sat them down and really got them to take deep thought into why they're playing the game, and what was so cool is when we got them to really sit down and give us their why, we found out that many of them want to go on and play professionally. So when we tapped into them buying into their future identity, their why, brought that back to the present moment, then reshaped all the behaviors, a lot of the things that we're talking about right now, because they changed their identity that is now in alignment with their why, we saw breakthrough. We saw 2 of the players win individual titles. We also saw the team finish second twice in their conference tournaments, which they hadn't done in several years. They set numerous school records throughout the spring season, and then they had most of the players almost pretty much go scratch or better within a few short months. And so it was a really amazing turnaround. Then they met their big goal of hosting a super regional. So it was a major success just to go from where they were to almost complete 180. And the key that bridged that gap was they knew their why.
Purpose is more powerful than pressure. So you need to find what your purpose is so that you can fuel it. Your why is what's going to wake you up in the mornings. It's what's going to transform you when you don't feel like it. Your why is what's going to motivate you to that next level. It's so important. This is one of the very first things whenever a college program or university invites us to come in to work with them is we want to discover that, because we want them to find it so it'll fuel their behaviors even that much higher, that'll take them to the next level. Your why can help your discipline, it can help your motivation, it can help your commitment to dive into and make it so much deeper and that much more powerful because it's fueling everything that you do.
That was number 5, know your why. Number 6 habit that is your key is we got to build a daily chain. What do we mean by that? Like, we got to build a daily chain. If you miss it once, fine. But if you miss it twice, it now becomes a pattern that is now a habit. So you have to understand consistency is what beats intensity. It's not like what you do once a week, it's what you do every single day that matters. When you really break that down, it really becomes success is a result of stacking daily wins. And so one of the fascinating things that we found out is a great example of this would be one of our college golfers that we work with. She was doing the daily habit of journaling her rounds. If you work with us more closely, you'll find out really fast that we preach the habit of journaling, and it's super important because that's how you can discover your patterns for good and for poor performance. And so this player that we worked with, she went all in. She started journaling. This particular player went from number 7 on her team to number 2 on the team within the first month. Major jump. You just don't really see that in the college game. But she did it because she went and journaled every single thing that she would do every single day when it came to practice, when it came to a swing lesson, when it came to playing or practice rounds or qualifying. She journaled. Like, she went all in. And so it was no surprise to us why she became number 2 on the team in the first month. Now, here's the fascinating thing. She then started taking some breaks, started taking some days off, started taking a couple days would go by and she didn't journal. And then what we started seeing was her performance actually started getting worse and worse. But then when she recommitted just before the conference championships, she went back and went all in on journaling again. Not to our surprise, she goes in, plays in the conference championships, and she was number 1 on the team in the conference championship. So that's just an example. It's all about what are you doing every single day. Some other examples could be you are visualizing your rounds. It could be you're forming the habit to make sure that you're doing your mental reps. Whatever the case may be, it's true in life too. You've got to do something that is going to move the needle every single day to your ultimate goal.
Daily reps develops mental muscle. And you need to develop that mental muscle. Like we talked about what would be a keystone habit, and we mentioned about mental imagery. When you're doing mental imagery, you're developing that mental muscle. Why? Because the brain doesn't know the difference between that. And then if you're going back and doing all the things that they are sharing about, not just on the course, but mainly away from the course, you're making those deposits in your brain account every single day. So then when you get out on the course, you've got something to withdraw. That's what it's like training like a pro, training like the PGA and the LPGA. That's like what they're doing is away from the course. They're getting their daily reps in, developing that mental muscle, and they're getting in shape. So then whenever that circumstance or that situation that shows up on the course, but it's not a thought process anymore. It is a strict reaction of no, that's not me, or whether it be a bad shot, a good shot, or whatnot, you're actually putting yourself to where you can actually perform at your best when it matters the most. Why? Because you got the work put in going into that. We're going to move into number 7. Make it ridiculously easy. If it's too big, you won't start. Shrink it until it's automatic. You don't need to take a big leap. You need to take a tiny step. What do I mean by that? Take 2 minutes. If you want to create a new habit, or if, like we're talking about mental imagery, if you want to get mental imagery as a daily habit, take 2 minutes. If you want to writing a book, take 2 minutes. If you want to start doing exercise like what we were talking about, take 2 minutes. Go to the gym for 2 minutes. Why? That makes it ridiculously easy. I'm just putting all these examples out there. If you want to learn how to play the guitar, take 2 minutes. Because what happens is 80% of the people that only start for 2 minutes will actually go much longer than 2 minutes. So make it ridiculously easy. You need to take a tiny step that actually makes it into a big leap over time, because it's that marginal gain, that tiny step, just taking 2 minutes out of that. And it's very simple. And then let's do it on the flip side. Change your environment that can actually make it mentally easy. What do I mean by changing environment? We talked about food, okay, as the optimal habit. The way you make it ridiculously easy by changing your environment is, instead of having cookies in a cookie jar, change it and put fruit on there where you don't even have the cookie jar in your kitchen. That way, because what happens is you're making self-control to be more dominant, because every single time you walk into the kitchen, you're seeing that cookie jar. And then you're having to use self control to do it. But discipline is removing the cookie jar out of it, changing your environment, and putting it in like fruit or an orange or an apple or a banana, for example, instead of the cookies. So then you made it ridiculously easy. You're taking self control out of the picture and making it a discipline because of that. That's what I mean by making it ridiculously easy.
Yeah.
Bo, you have anything on that?
Yep. And one of the cool stories about just making it ridiculously easy, I love the story of one of our students. When I actually came back and reopened my golf school, one of the first guys that I started working with had a really bad slice. He would drive with about a 40-yard slice, so it was pretty big. We worked on the mechanics. We started talking about what is it supposed to look like with the swing plane, the face angle, showed him all the rules. And after 2 lessons, we got it reduced to about 25 yards, so it wasn't too bad, but it's still bad. I don't see him over the winter months because he's a guy that works at the post office. It was in November, as we know. Christmas season's coming up. Post office gets really busy, and so I keep tabs with him over the winter months. I find out that he's only practiced once and I had played twice. And but before I sent him off after that last lesson in November, I actually showed him psychometric training, like how to do mental reps with his swing. In March, first time I see him, he hits his first 7 shots with his driver, and they're all 5 yard, beautiful baby draws. I'm looking at him like confused. What have you been doing? And I was like, have you lied? And he said, no. He said, I honestly, I did not lie. I've only played 2 times, practiced once. The only thing that I can tell you that I've done differently or haven't told you about is I took what you shared about the mental reps and Bo, like when I had downtime throughout the day, like a minute here, 3 minutes there, 2 minutes here, I would just sit there and do mental reps of the perfect swing and what it felt like and what I should be doing to hit a draw. And I looked at him, I was like, that is amazing. That's an example of just doing little things, like make it ridiculously easy. So that was number 7. Number 8 is what we call the use the if then formula. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your preparation. Success is planned, it's not something that you hope for. You can do is you run it through that equation of, hey, if I lay my clothes out, I'll train in the morning. So if you're going to the gym, it's just laying out your t-shirt and your gym shorts and your socks and shoes, whatever you would normally take to the gym. If you place it right there by the door or on your bed or whatever, it basically forces you to trip over it in such a way that, hey, I need to do this. Hey, if I pray before my round, I'll stay composed. Sometimes there's a lot of power in that. And this
Yeah.
is why quiet time is so important to us because what we're doing is we're basically removing ourselves out of this physical world in a sense, and we're giving ourselves a different perspective on what really matters, and it's the eternal perspective. And when we're communing with our Father, our Creator, so to speak, it allows us to see things from His perspective. And that's so important because if we operate in the flesh, then we're going to basically make decisions that are very, I guess you would say, hasty or very quick and impulsive versus operating from a place that has the mind of Christ, having the Holy Spirit inside us and the fruits of the Spirit coming out. But it's basically putting things in such a place where if we do X, we're going to get Y and Z, so to speak.
You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your preparation. Here's the other thing. I'm going to shift that a little bit. You don't rise to the occasion. You sink to the level of your training. So your separation is in your preparation. For example, if you get your mental reps in a way, not just mental imagery, let's say power talk, use power talk statements. So then what happens is when you come up onto the course, whenever that situation arises, it becomes a mental alarm clock that actually changes your trajectory, so to speak, mentally, that actually puts your mental performance at a much higher level. Why? Because you got the mental reps in going into it. That's what I mean, is because you don't rise to the occasion. You sink to the level of your training. You sink to your training. You're following your process. You're getting dialed in. Your preloaded decisions to automate good choices. That's what you're doing. You're using like your environment to win the internal battle, like we talked about before, shifting that environment. That separation is your ultimate confidence.
Yeah. So that was number 8, use the if then formula. And so number 9 is you embrace the process. Like at first, it's going to feel awkward. Like it really is going to feel awkward. It's going to be almost embarrassing. Like when you're embracing the process, whether that's working on a swing change, whether that's doing mental reps or doing psychomuscular training. But then here's what's cool: if you stick with the process, you literally become unstoppable. And that's really what we're after. One of the cool stories that I like to share, we had a college golfer that we're working with. It's a D1 player. The fascinating thing about his story is that he went to a swing coach and he basically shared with him, like, hey, I want to play on the PGA Tour, but I understand that I need to make some changes to my swing. And so his coach told him, is, look, you're going to really need to spend a lot of time, and it's probably going to take you 9 to 12 months to really get this swing change to hold up under pressure. But he said, I don't care. I need to embrace it. And so that's one of the key habits that he did. He embraced the process and he went all in on it. And one of the neat things is that because he was also working with us on the mental aspect, using psychomuscular training, he worked with a swing coach. Then he was using what we teach with the 4-phase process of how to accelerate a swing change. And what was so cool is he started this in May, and his coach is basically expecting that he really won't have the new swing holding up until the following spring season. But fast forward 3 months, he qualifies for his first tournament. Not only does he qualify, but he goes in and plays in this tournament. And he finishes second on the team. His coach was amazed. He goes back to his coach and he had a conversation with him. And he was like, hey, I saw your results. That was amazing. How'd you do that? And he said, I was able to apply what Bo and Shannon was teaching me on how to take everything you're teaching me and just doing so many reps mentally with it under pressure in a tournament setting. And that's one of the fascinating things about it, is that he embraced the process. None of that would have been possible if he did not go all in. I love this verse in James 1:4. It said, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete. And man, I love that. So good.
We wrote a book called In the Zone Secrets: How to Get in the Zone at the Flip of the Switch. We're going to give you a free book on what, if you want to learn how to make those swing changes like what that college player did, if you want to be able to learn that much faster. Matter of fact, we actually say that when you get the type of ways that we teach you how to learn a swing change, you can learn it 50% faster, just like what he did. Get our book, and then if you can, drop a comment below with us and subscribe.
Number 10, this is the last one. You got to get your mind right. So your game rises or falls with your belief. If you think you can't, you're right. And that's why Henry Ford says, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And so this is super important, guys, because when you think about your belief, the belief you can change, not someday, now. And one of the cool stories about this particular example, as far as like getting your mind, we had a college golfer that we worked with that had really been struggling over his college career. It got to the point it was so bad that his scores were all over the place because some of the rounds were coming in the 80s. He couldn't be relied upon to go to tournaments. He knew that his mind and his belief needed to change, and so he started working with us. We started teaching him our system and showed him psychomuscular training, but even more so, power talk, the identity piece. So when we shifted the belief that he had about his game, fast forward a few months later, he plays in the Carolina section. It's called the Carolinas Open. It's a major that's open to professionals and amateurs. What's neat is that in this particular tournament, there were a lot of big names, former tour players, former national champions as far as in D1 golf and stuff. So there were a lot of like star names that were in the field. He ends up winning it. He won it. The big reason why he was able to win it is because he changed the story and the belief that he had about his game and then his life. And as a result of that, it's again like that verse I shared earlier, but it comes from Romans 12:2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And this particular player, that's exactly what he did.
There was a Navy SEAL sniper. He was getting an award and stuff like that, and he was at the range and he was shooting. He was doing practice, but he had a journalist that was sitting, that was beside him, and that was interviewing him, talking about his process and other things like that. And the Navy SEAL, he was dialed in, and he's sitting there, he's shooting. He totally locked in on his target, boom. And then, but see, these targets weren't just any targets. They were a good ways away, and they were moving targets. And so he would miss one, not react. Boom, shoot again. Miss, hit it, and then it would miss, and the journalist was sitting there looking at him, was amazed because he didn't react whenever he missed. He actually asked him, he said, "What was going on?" You said, "I noticed you didn't even react when you missed your target." And then the sniper looked at him and said, "Negativity slows me down." That's what we mean by saying get your mind. If you're thinking negative, it slows you down. Not just that, but it actually, we have found there are case studies when we notice that if you have negative thoughts or if you're thinking negative, that it actually affects your coordination. That's why you want to eliminate the negativity that's going in there. Now, can we control negative thoughts? We ask that to everybody. No, you can't control negative thoughts because they come in at random. But it's how you respond to those negative thoughts. We dive deeper into that in our book as well. So your beliefs shape your behavior. So think like a champion.
Those were the 10 key habits that allow you to get to your breakthrough. And we got one final challenge for you. What we want you to do over this next week, over this next month, pick one habit, just one. Start today. Don't wait for the right time. The time is now. I think I love that quote that says, like, when's the best time to plant a tree? And they say 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Start today. So make sure that you pick a habit. Make sure you do that. And if you like this, drop a comment in the comment below. We're here to help serve you guys. And so Shannon and I, we are actively engaging in answering comments. We love people in there, make comments in the community. And we want to serve you and get you to that next level. Also, if you would like our book, again, we'll put that in the comment as well. And you have that link. The next thing is, if you like this type of training and you want to go deeper and maybe you want the hand holding experience, we got a really cool free training that we'll also put in the description below, and you can go watch that and then you can see what it looks like to work with us a little more intimately. So make sure you do that. With that being said, Shannon, you got anything to say before we close out?
Yeah, you get your mental reps in and you start doing these 10 habits. Guess what? Your swing will thank you. Your family will thank you because you're going to be a different person because your separation is in your preparation. You're going to be moving forward. And then guess what? Your future self will thank you because you are actually performing at where you were originally created to perform at that higher level.
We'll see you in the next video. Get in the zone.